And welcome to Occult Forces TV. And what we're going to be going over is one of my most prized subjects coming out of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and up until the 80s. It has to do with Jim Jones and the People's Temple. And Jim Jones and the People's Temple started off back in around 1955, 1956 in Indiana, Lynn, Indiana, and Indianapolis, Indiana. And then the cult, so it became a cult, so to speak, as people say. The tragedy of the Guyana massacre of the people of the People's Temple were basically murdered. And there's so much phenomena behind the subject of Jim Jones and the People's Temple. First of all, Jim Jones and the People's Temple was a Christian communist group, evangelist communist type group, very communist. And I'll just break down some of the pinpoints I've seen through my research that made me ask more questions. Number one, Jonestown did not stop in 1978 at the end of the Jonestown massacre. It continued till the mid-80s, up until around 1985. In 1979, NBC went back into the country Guyana, which is the only English-speaking country in South America. And again, most of the population of Guyana is on the east coast, the seaboard of the country. 90% of the population is on the seabed of the country. The interior is very desolate. You only have the Mara Indians, missionaries, Nazis. Nazis share the jungle as well. They did at that time. But then you had fringe religious groups that were in the interior of Guyana. But okay, so in 1979, the NBC crew went to Guyana, and they went to Jonestown, and they found that there was still people inhabiting Jonestown. The same tractor trailer that allegedly the congressman, the assassins of the congressman Leo Ryan, killed him from. They were still driving that tractor trailer around in Jonestown, and Jonestown was going until the mid-80s. A lot of people didn't know that. Now, through my research on Jonestown, I was able to identify that the real man, James Warren Jones, Jim Jones, I came to the conclusion that he did not die in Jonestown. Okay, so there's a movie called Guyana Crime of the Century. And if you watch the film, which was released it was released in 79, it's almost like they started filming the movie before it even happened. But at the end of the movie, Guyana Crime of the Century, you have the main character, the main actor, who is depicted of Jim Jones. He dies in the pavilion. Then there's another guy who looks just like Jim Jones in the movie who dies right next to the main actor. And the guy who looks just like Jim Jones looks even more like Jim Jones than the main actor, and he's wearing, the red top with the khaki pants, just like when the NBC crew went down there, they found a Jones wearing the same thing. Now, okay, so back in the 1960s, you had James Warren Jones through the department. There's been researchers like Jim Hogan and John Judge who did their research. They can back it up too. There's documentation on this that there was not just one person using James Warren Jones' passport, who is Jim Jones. There was two people using the passport simultaneously. Okay, so in fact, in the 60s, there was two individuals acting as the Jim Jones. Two Jim Jones. One real Jones and then a lookalike Jones. So in 1978, when the massacre happened, guess what? There was two Joneses found in Jonestown. There was the pavilion body double, and you can see, I did presentations on this many times before. You can see that there's like sort of a prosthetic type mask that was being worn, but you don't even have to go there. You can look at the ears and compare the ears, and you can see the pavilion Jones was a double. Then not far from the pavilion, there was a cottage of another Jones, which was not the real Jones. So the real Jim Jones and his original double, or one of the doubles, got away. Then there was 2 doubles left there to convince the public and to convince anybody who knew about the double that the real Jim Jones was alive. So I discovered that. And after I discovered that, I was psyched. And I started realizing really interesting things like, wait a minute, why are there no facial identifying photographs of any of the victims? Not one. Then I started reading the FBI file titled Rumor, and I was like, this is hogwash. You know, the feds sold us a bunch, this is a joke. And so I threw the FBI file away on it, and I started doing my own research some more. And I started asking some really interesting questions. Then I started getting, this was like back a few years ago, and I started getting, this was years and years ago, then I started getting emails. And lo and behold, one of the people who emailed me was actually there when it happened. And I didn't know. And they sent me some photographs, and it was photographs of inside the cottage. And you can see little tin buckets, like they were passing out the poison, but you can tell by looking at the bodies that they didn't drink no poison. You can tell they were strangled or shot or something. It was really weird. And so I said, this is interesting. Okay. So I started researching more and more and more and more into it. And man, I came to the conclusion that, you know, when they went down to Guyana, originally they started, see, Jonestown was a commerce point. You had Jonestown, then you had the infamous Hilltown. Hilltown was just like Jonestown. It was ran by David Hill, who was part of a group called the Black Israelites, and it was right near Jonestown. But Jonestown was originally set up as a commerce point, and the People's Temple sold all sorts of gadgets down there. They sold tape recorders, anything of technological Western value. They would sell it at skyrocketed prices. Then, of course, they had their headquarters in Georgetown. And the People's Temple served a lot of purposes in Guyana. You know, first of all, the Guyanese, they were concerned about the Venezuelans invading their territory. There was oil, there was gold, there were a lot of valuables, and you know, uranium possibly. There were a lot of valuables in Guyana. Guyana is rich in resources. So Forbes Burnham, who was the leader of Guyana when Jones was down there, and then you had his opposition, Chetty Jenkins, but Forbes Burnham, he was concerned about Venezuela invading Guyana. And up until this point, Guyana was a British colony in 1966, and they lost their colony. The British lost their colony in 66. Okay, so they lost their colony in 66. So the Guyanese had to protect their own land and run their own politics or whatever. So going up to the time when Jones was there, the Venezuelans looked at Guyana as an opportunity. If we invade, we can get the resources. So the Burnham administration, they thought having Jones in Guyana was perfect because the Venezuelans were not going to invade an area with a large group of Americans living there because it would be too political. The American military would get involved, the United Nations would get involved, and the Venezuelans would not want that type of confrontation, of course, right? And because they get loans from America mainly. But so Burnham loved having Jones down there because Jones being in the jungle with his little group, and it was in the area of Matthews Ridge of Jonestown. Again, big mining area. So before Jonestown became Jonestown, that was all mining area. I think Charles Gary himself said it that Jonestown was sitting on a gold mine, and Charles Gary was one of the lawyers, along with Mark Lane of Jim Jones. So Jonestown was at a strategic point in Guyana, and Jonestown had a large arsenal of weapons and guns coming through. You know, there were rumors of child prostitution going on in Georgetown with the little girls that were coming down there. And eventually, the late Congressman Leo Ryan said, you know, enough is enough. Like, whatever's going on down here in Jonestown, it's scaring us in America. And Jones was already becoming unpopular in the San Francisco area. He had a church in Los Angeles off Alvarado and Hoover, a big church in Los Angeles off Alvarado and Hoover. That's the Pico Union Westlake area. Which reminds me, one of the Joneses body doubles was arrested for lewd conduct, a homosexual act in the Westlake area at a theater. And the judges in LA dropped the case, but the reason in the People's Temple basically had all their lawyers, like Tim Stone and all these people, basically forced the case closed, not because they were necessarily embarrassed about a homosexual case, which would have been embarrassing enough for the reputation of the church, but because the individual who got arrested was not the actual James Warren Jones, but was a double. So the lewd conduct was that of a double. So there's a lot of, and I'm not the first person to bring this up. There's other authors out there who brought stuff like this up. There's other intellectuals out there who have deep insight into the whole massacre in Jonestown. But anyway, going back to what I was saying. So my original conclusion about this whole thing was the People's Temple was definitely infiltrated. Like Mike Prokes was allegedly an FBI agent. And then he died, and after he came back to America, he ended up allegedly committing suicide, but anyway, the People's Temple was definitely infiltrated, and then going down into Guyana, they were re-infiltrated again. And so a lot of the people, I think, who survived were meant to survive. There were people who went along with this whole thing that happened in Guyana, but it's just weird. It was just weird research. The whole thing was a deep research. And I spent years showing people. Like, I used to walk around with 2 photographs of the doubles, of the ears and stuff like that. I just sit there and show people. And I remember I used to go to nightclubs and all this kind of stuff and show people. And people would get around and look at the pictures and be like, man, that's interesting. I've never seen anything like that before. I'm like, yeah, the real guy got away, And I didn't realize at the time how, not that many, I'm like, man, I'm the only person out here talking about this stuff. This is getting interesting. But then I came across other interesting angles into the Jonestown thing. Like, for one, there's a documentary called The Most Dangerous Man Alive with Frank Turple. And Frank Turple's a whole story I don't want to get into. But Frank Turple was a well-known CIA guy back in the 70s and 80s. And there's a deep connection between Turple and all that stuff, and Turple's holding up the Jonestown magazine in his documentary and all. It's a long thing. I don't got time for all that. But that was my stuff. The body double stuff was originally my research. I never seen anybody actually sit down and break the body double stuff down like I did. Like John Judge said there was body doubles. There's other people there was a guy who wrote the book about the lewd conduct. He brought out the body double, but I never seen anybody actually sit down and explain to people how there was one real Jim Jones, 3 doubles. They found 2 doubles dead at the site because the real guy and the other double got away because there was originally 2 doubles in the 60s. Nobody ever broke that down like I broke it down. And so that's one of the subjects. And my God, I spent years on that subject. I used to sit down and listen to recording after recording after recording after recording of the People's Temple. The San Diego University has a large collection. Like, I know Laura Cole. I emailed Laura Cole before. I respect Laura Cole. Tim and Mike Carter, I know they're still around, or hopefully they're still around. I remember looking into a lot of their, a lot of stuff they had to say. My thing on Jonestown was more about the children. When I saw how many children were basically murdered, it made me feel like that's not right. That all these children were murdered and the adults aren't, the men in this country or the adults in this world aren't adult enough to share with the new children coming in what happened. You know what I'm saying? So that was my thing on the Jonestown thing. But I encourage people to go back and look at it for yourself. Like, I got videos where you can obviously see in today's world with computers, you can use symmetrical computer technology, and people should be able to prove like these aren't the same people. Like, you can do it. Like, there's computer people out there who have the software. I don't have the software, or I'd show people. But man, that was one of my favorite subjects, the Jonestown stuff. And oh my God, I remember the first time I started looking into the Jonestown thing about the ham radio and stuff like that in Georgetown. I used to write letters to the Federal Communications Commission and ask them about it. And then I remember when I really started getting interested in it, I had wrote, this is years ago, I'd sit down and write the CIA letters, and they wrote me back and they told me to go to the library. And I was like, oh man, you know what I mean? But so, you know, that was one of my favorite subjects. I really enjoyed that subject, Jonestown. I always wanted to know, like, I wanted to know where Jim Jones went. I imagine he left Jonestown in a helicopter. I imagine that. I imagine he left the area. He, my breakdown of Jonestown was he left 12 hours before the massacre. The same time that Leslie Wagner Wilson left Jonestown, where she claimed she went on a picnic and they walk out of Jonestown. I think the Jim Jones and the double left at that time. Basically, the people who knew it was going to happen left. And then, of course, you had the unfortunate incident with the congressman. And the unfortunate incident with the congressman that happened at the Port Kaituma. And that's I don't know if I want to go into that on the internet, but you had the interesting thing with the congressman in Port Kaituma. Uh, I think Dwyer had a body double at Port. Fuck it, I think Dwyer had a body double at Port Kaituma, because I go back and I watch the original NBC footage. There's a guy that looks just like Dwyer at Port Kaituma, and then they're saying Dwyer was there. On the death tape, you hear the double saying, "Get Dwyer out of here! Get Dwyer out of here!" But then when you go back and watch the NBC footage, they're all saying Dwyer was at the airport, blah, blah, blah. And if you go back and you really study the NBC footage, there's a guy that looks just like Dwyer at the airport. So Jones had a double, Dwyer had a double. You know what I mean? But so I don't know. That was my research for years that I did. I love that research, boy. I spent years on like on the Hilltown stuff, and I really enjoyed that stuff. Yeah. And the public is delusional. The public is delusional. I encourage people to go back and do some research and look at Jones's ears and stuff, and look at the movie Guy in a Crime of the Century. You can see the blah, 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 blah. If people actually go back and do real research, they can see what I'm talking about. And there's a lot to be learned there. And that's Occult Forces TV for tonight on Jonestown.